Hey everyone, this is Funmilola and you are watching the Think Alpha Project.
All right, guys, we're back on the Think Alpha Project, and this week we have the one and only wonderful Funmilola. How you doing, girl?
I'm good. How you feeling?
Good. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
All right, so we gotta talk. Are you ready for that?
I'm prepared. What we gotta talk about?
All right, so I know first of all that we're gonna go into quite a bit of things because you now have a recent project that you put out. So I'm gonna ask you about that.
Okay.
And then other than that, though, I want folks to know more so like who we're talking to here, because they don't understand the magnitude of the person we're talking about right here. So we know that you're a professor.
Yes.
You're a professor at the school we went to together.
Yes.
Which is really good. Mm-hmm. And then you're a professor of Pan-African Studies.
Yes.
Doing that.
Yes.
And then also, I know that you are very, very active in the scene when it comes to like social justice and activism with that. So you want to talk a little bit more about that real quick?
Indeed. So yes, I am a professor of Pan-African Studies at Cal State LA. You already know what it is. I'm just at this point looking toward completing the second year of instruction. And so it has been a phenomenal 2 years. My students are phenomenal and brilliant. I'm grateful for the experience. It has been also a challenge being a new professor. It is a great deal of work, but I really do love that work.
Yeah.
In terms of teaching, that's one thing, and then my creative work is a whole nother realm of my life. So you mentioned my project that recently came out at the Pan-African Film Festival, and that's a stage play. It's entitled The Intersection Woke Black Folk, and I can give a short synopsis. Essentially, it deals with the complexity of Black political identity, that Black people are very complex people. And I think that what happens is that historically, Black people have been conceptualized as a monolithic people, as a not complex people.
Right.
And what the play does is it complicates Black political identity. And it was presented to the Pan-African Film Festival as possibly being their featured theatrical event, their featured theatrical production. Mm-hmm. People don't know that with the Pan-African Film Festival that they often do featured stage productions, that we often do featured stage productions, that the festival oftentimes does that. And so my production was chosen as the featured stage production, and we opened it last week. And to a full house, and the reception of the work was phenomenal, and people were really excited about that because they saw themselves in the characters.
Right.
And that is linked into my social justice work in terms of my work with, combating anti-Black state violence in a number of the organizations that I work with. And so I simply just, desire for the world to be healthier and fairer than what it was when I came into it.
That's awesome. And I love what you're saying about, really, to me, it's you're elevating consciousness. Like, to me, that's what that is. But if I were to ask you, like, what is the main premise of what you are creating right now? The main premise.
The main premise is with my creative work and my scholarship and academic work and my work in various social justice spaces, what I am creating, the main premise would be for humans to be able to engage each other with greater compassion. For humans to have greater intellectual and emotional maturity to the extent that we would be able to communicate more effectively. That I think so much of the devastation of the world, so much of the trauma of the world is an outgrowth of humans being either incapable or unwilling to communicate effectively with each other. And that's the main premise of it.
Wow. Do you think that happens? Like, I feel like what you just said, like, that's the root of so many, this is the root of so many issues.
Yeah.
Even in just relationships, period.
Yeah, in relationships, period. Family relationships, romantic relationships. Do we know how to engage each other not just respectably, but to communicate effectively and say what it is that we really are trying to say. Do we know how to be vulnerable? Do we know how to communicate what we're really feeling? Vulnerability, we are trained to like avoid, right?
Right.
We are literally trained to not be too deeply invested in the process of being emotional, because we've been taught that being, that fully engaging our emotions is it's a sign of weakness. It makes you stronger to be able to be vulnerable, to effectively communicate the things that hurt you or that don't sit well with you or that you don't agree with, and to do that without fighting with the person that you're in conversation with.
Right.
That shows up in why a lot of people's romantic relationships disintegrate and can't do well, because we're not trained. We are quite literally not, from young age, we are not trained on how to deal with difficult emotion.
Do you feel like that? Because, with what you just said, I feel like I'm just going to speak specifically to like Black culture, especially with men. It's not really taught like that. Like, it's not taught. And what we're taught to do growing up is don't cry, be a man, whatever that is, whatever that means. And then you grow older, and then just like you said, you have people who they have these unresolved hurts or these things that they suppress.
Yeah.
That they're not letting out.
Exactly.
And me, honestly, like, it's so interesting because for me, I don't subscribe to, I chose a long time ago not to subscribe to that. Like, I chose to be vulnerable as much as I can.
Right.
And I've learned a few things. I've learned that when I speak how I feel in the moment, and not as a, like, if somebody does something wrong to me, it's not about me checking them necessarily. It's like, hey, I just want you to, let me put you aside. It's like, I just want you to know this is how it came across. This is how I felt.
Right.
Like, I don't know if that's what you were going for, but this is what it feels. And I don't, like, did I do something? Like, is there something I did here? And a lot of folks mistake that for, I don't know, weakness or something.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
But I mean, imagine how powerful that is for you to not try to fight someone on whenever you feel any particular way, but for you to be able to do exactly what you said that you do, or that which has been natural to you, which is to say, hey, I feel like this is how what you did made me feel, or this is how I processed what happened, as opposed to being like, you're a whack person and you do whack things and I'm not dealing with you anymore. People do that all the time, and you bring up how Black men are implicated in all of this, and how, it depends on where you're talking about geographically located in the world, because what Black masculinity is supposed to look like. But in America specifically, within an American Western context, Black masculinity is supposed to look like a very specific thing. And you, based off of what you're telling me about how you navigate the world, that in many ways you exist outside of that. That, you're supposed to be, you feel me? Just
right.
You feel me? And all of that, it doesn't, you can't be permeated. And what that does is makes a wall happen. And if vulnerability is not allowed to happen because your masculinity demands that you do not allow that to happen, because you've been trained that way from the time you were a young boy, that means that you cannot connect with people in a real way, because the basis of connection is the willingness to see each other outside of just the physical aesthetic, that I'm seeing who you are behind all of this. All of that is a process of being willing to show what you are. That's vulnerability. You can't connect with anybody in any true substantial way unless you're willing to be vulnerable. And if you've been trained that your masculinity depends on, or your strength as a woman even, that your strength is to not allow for people to permeate that, you've lost the capacity to connect with people in a way that would allow, that brings about joy. Joy is also birthed from vulnerability.
Right, and oh man, that's so good you said that, because like what I like to say is that people put up this wall, act all tough. I call it acting tough, right? You just act here acting. Yeah. Just acting tough, right? Yeah. People do this in order to avoid whatever pain might come from feeling vulnerable. Yeah. Like whatever pain they perceive is going to come from that. But what happens is you also it costs you something, and what it costs you is the joy, because this same emotion of joy is accessed through that same vulnerability.
Yes.
And if you're blocking what that is, then that means you're also blocking the good.
There it is. And that's literally it, is that when people refuse to show how they feel, what they are, because they don't want to be vulnerable, they don't want to be up for scrutiny, up for judgment, what you're doing is you're trying to protect yourself from being hurt or being rejected or being whatever it may be. Yeah. But you're also preventing yourself from experiencing the goodness, joy, positivity that comes from being willing to be open and express yourself. Because that's also the birth of joy. So vulnerability is the space where from it can come pain, but also from it can come joy. So you take the risk to be vulnerable and know that something good can come of it, and there's a possibility of avoiding trauma if you know how to navigate negative emotions. We also, we get easily traumatized because when something bad happens or something that we don't like happens, we are taught to take it personally. It must be something because something that I did, or it must be me, or you start judging yourself. And there's a way in which, we can train, for lack of a better way of explaining this, we can train our minds to not necessarily be so hyper judgmental of ourselves.
People are so quick to judge first. It's just interesting, and I can see why this is the root. Even on a cultural context, where it's between cultures or between races, for example. At the end of the day, just like you said, it's really about vulnerability versus judgment, compassion versus judgment.
Yep. Part of me wants to say that maybe judgment has its time that you assess, and maybe not self-judgment, but like if you're judging other people, that there's a moment in time where maybe judgment should be there. If you're judging, if somebody's engaging in behavior that is harmful, and because of that, you make a judgment on them because of that. You're judging them as a person that is engaging in harmful behavior, et cetera, whatever it may be. But just kind of unrelenting self-critical self-judgment, that comes from somewhere. I think a lot of human beings have been trained to believe that it's normal to just be hypercritical of ourselves, and to compare ourselves to other human beings. This person is doing that. This person got more likes than me. This person got more followers than me. This person is popping. This person, their abs is more on point than mine. And it's just kind of comparison is an act of violence against the self. Iyanla Vanzant said that. I love Iyanla. A lot of people, she's awesome. A lot of people don't rock with Iyanla, but I do love Iyanla for what she does offer us. Some people think that her assessment is not nuanced enough, that there's some gray areas. There's some gray areas that she doesn't address properly.
Got it.
But I think that the foundational, what she offers is gorgeous healing work. And she stated at one point that comparison is an act of violence against the self because it assumes that somebody could in any way compare to what you are. We are all fully individual. And the idea that we would look at our lives and then look at somebody else's lives and then say, well, okay, they got that, I got this, is a strange, unnecessary, violent behavior toward the fullness of what you are, which could never be compared to what anybody else is. But we don't know that we're doing it, and so we do it all the time.
Well, let's not even talk about Instagram, because Instagram is the vehicle through which people compare now, and it's so mainstream that you almost can't avoid it.
Yeah.
A friend of mine, his girlfriend doesn't have Instagram or Facebook, and I'm like, yo, that's rare. It's rare to find people who don't have that. So we live in a day and age where, unfortunately, comparison is definitely. I feel like that's always been a part of the experience for people.
Yeah.
The human experience.
Yeah.
But now it's in your face all the freaking time.
Now it's a daily process where it's it's on your phone in a very particular way. I think, yeah, just like you said, it's always been part of how humans engage each other, kind of this comparison, but now it's something else. It doesn't mean that we can't use social media to connect and to build and to learn and to grow and to enhance and evolve and communicate with each other. We can use it for all of those phenomenal, wonderful, tremendous things, but if you don't know how to use it properly, then it just becomes a tool that you use to compare yourself to other people.
Dang.
And hella people fall into that trap. Hella people.
I know.
Anxiety is on the loose. Anxiety is on the loose in 2018, 2017, 2016. It is on the up and up. Mm-hmm. Why? It's not because of no reason. It's not because of no reason. Right, it's because of something that's happening in this technological era. So we use it for the good, and we have to mediate the bad.
Right.
And be careful of that.
Wow, so I know we just went like super deep into, which is a really good conversation for a lot of people, especially because a lot of people are judgmental, and a lot of folks are in relationships, either it be with friends or romantically. Mm-hmm. And I know folks don't understand why they can't get along with their friend or their partner. And so this is like really delving into a root of that.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about the play that you did in your process of going into, of actually completing it. Because, to create something from nothing and to actually put it out, I know that's a big feat.
I was very celebratory when we finished the first run of the show. And
you're like, yes, winning.
That's exactly the feeling. And I was so celebratory because I was just like, we did it. That was a grand amount of work to do it. And so it was a moment where I understood why a lot of people have the idea to do grand creative projects, but don't ever do it. Right. And so, because there's a lot of people with great ideas. Well, everybody, so many people have, most people, I want to say, have some idea that at one point in time in their life, we could identify as a great idea that maybe never gets off the ground because the amount of physical, emotional, and psychological and intellectual labor it takes to manifest a creative project of a grand proportion. I know that for me, specifically in the field of theater and writing this one-person show stage play, I have been thinking about it for 3 years. I originally conceptualized it 3 years ago. I put out a video which was almost like an introduction to the themes that are addressed in the play 2 years ago to see how people would react to it. And I remember when I first wrote the first kind of draft of the trailer for this, I remember thinking that people were going to be like almost angry, like not like it, to not like it to the extent that I felt like people might feel called out by my characters because they would see themselves in my characters. Mm-hmm. And I'm calling out my characters in the play and saying, y'all got some stuff you need to work on. And I thought that maybe because people would see themselves in it, that they would feel called out by it and be like, in some way dismiss it. Yeah. But the opposite happened. People saw themselves in it and just fully became invested in the project in a way that I had never seen before. So when I first wrote the poem, which became the trailer to the play, I was just kind of like, okay, let's just see what happens. I had never seen any of my work be that reacted to in the way in which that particular piece was. And I was like, okay, this is resonating. This is resonating with people's, not just their minds, this is resonating with them on a heart energetic level. Mm-hmm. And so I took it from there and continued to conceptualize the project. I was like in grad school at the time. I had so many other obligations, so I didn't have the capacity to devote myself fully to the creative project. I wish I could have, but I needed to make a living, and I wasn't making a living as a playwright.
Have to. It's important. You gotta feed your mouth, feed yourself.
Period. And so I can't just be like, well, I'm a playwright now, so I'm gonna go ahead and quit my job, and I won't be teaching this semester. And because first of all, I do love teaching, but that is my profession. This is my job, and I have to do my job. And my creative process as it pertained to playwriting took the back seat for quite some time. But then what happened is I got first, the trailer continues to travel. It's traveling. People are seeing it more and more. Eventually, when in its first articulation, its first performance, Angela Davis saw it, and she really gave a really beautiful stamp of approval on it. And Angela Davis, of course, everybody knows, is one of the most, what is even the word? One of the most profoundly purposeful and active freedom fighters of our time, and of a past generation, because at this point she's an elder now, and she laid so much of the intellectual groundwork for us as it pertains to social justice, understanding what a just world could look like as it pertains to mass incarceration, race, gender, all of it. She gave us so much of herself in her life. So that is why she is so decorated in the way that she is within the world, and specifically within the circles that demand a more just world. When she gave such a beautiful stamp of approval of the work, I felt humbled by the fact that she was invested in my vision. And then later on, Erykah Badu saw it specifically on Instagram, and she gave a grand stamp of approval. Yeah.
Dang, I didn't know these things happen. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was, first of all, Angela Davis stamp of approval. I was like, okay.
You like, what an
I'm
honor.
done. I don't need to do much else in my life. And then when I saw the comment from Badu, I threw my phone. I threw my phone. I said,
we good, we done.
I threw my phone. And from that point, just continue, still dealing with my daily obligations, but finding time to develop the work.
Right.
Eventually, if we fast forward some time later, I was able to connect with the Pan-African Film Festival. They were fully on board with bringing this piece on as their featured theatrical production for the film festival. And it was a great honor because the Pan-African Film Festival is not just only a phenomenal cultural production, but it's also the largest Black film festival that exists in the Western world for sure. And so when we solidified that, what it did was that it gave me a immediate due date that I needed to work with. Like, you have this much time to get it together.
You gotta get it together.
No production team, no nothing. Just me and my idea. Over time,
man,
I got a DJ, I got a pianist, I got somebody that could help with, stage management, and I got somebody that could help with lighting, and it all just really kind of last minute pieced itself together because people in my community, and just kind of, even not necessarily in my community, but were just around, that were observing the project and believed in it, they came on board and they said, whatever you need to get this done, let me know, we're gonna do it. And I was very grateful that a team composed themselves to help me get this done, and we got it done, and it came out, and I was absolutely terrified.
I was just gonna ask you if you were scared.
I was absolutely terrified. But that's what it takes to take your work. And I can only speak from this place of knowingness because I just went through it.
Exactly.
I was terrified. Quite literally, and I'm not a particularly nervous person.
Right.
I was shaking internally, everything can absolutely go wrong right now. everything could go wrong because we didn't have enough time. You know how it takes time to get everything perfect. Okay, we good to go. Not at all. Take about everything that you imagine, the time that you would need to make everything set so that we can have a perfectly run show. I want you to take just a quarter of that time. That's how much time we had. A quarter of that time. We did as many rehearsals as we could in the very small period of 2 weeks that we had to get it done, and we did it. And and what it demanded of me was discipline. Creative discipline, true creative discipline, to the extent that I had to say no. In order to make this play happen, I had to say no to many things that I wanted to do. I think that when we think about discipline, we're like, okay, I got my schedule, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. Sometimes it demands, especially if you have a firm due date, a firm deadline, you're gonna have to say no to things that you want to do. There were a few things where I'm like, dang, I can't even all right.
No, I can't do that.
That
right
I
now.
planned for months to do. No, can't do it.
I love that you just dropped some knowledge just now, because I think people don't understand that. I see a lot of folks when they try to, they have something, they have a goal, and then they have a pathway, and they're going. But then you also see them start doing other stuff at the same time. I'm like, well, but I thought you wanted to do, I have a friend who's like that. He's like, I have this business thing I'm doing. I'm like, cool. But next week, he was like, yeah, man, I just sat with this dude, and we're gonna do this. I'm like, dude, you just wanted to do that. And just like you said, like the only reason why even something like this podcast came to fruition is because even with Herbalife, my the business that I have, and then even with a couple of other things that I have going on too, I had to be like, no. For now, no, I need to do this right now, get this going. Because there is a point in time where it becomes second nature. Yep. Like what once took so much mental energy becomes second nature.
Yes.
And you start to execute on it without thinking.
Yes.
Then you can get to the next thing. And it doesn't have to take that long to get to that point.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, but you can't have like 3 newly infant projects at one time, because that takes too much attention and energy to master it before you can add another thing. But people don't think that way. For some reason, many people, like even for instance, your friend, if you have 3 newly conceptualized ideas, you're gonna try to give 30% of your energy to this one, 30% here, and then 30% here. It's not gonna work. Like, give this one 80% of your time, and then 20% to survive and go to work or whatever. But give that 80% of your energy that you have, master it to the extent that you can. It becomes second nature. Then do your next one. That's real.
Wow, so it's just cool to know that I didn't even ask you any of that, but you brought it up that that's what you had to do.
Yeah, I had to devote my creative energy to one thing for a very specific amount of time. And now I can never unlearn all of those things that I learned, even though it was really strenuous for a few months. That's okay. I survived. Even though I was nervous and anxiety ridden right before I went on stage, that's okay. I survived. Like we almost treat like nervousness and anxiety as like a stop sign. Like, okay, I'm too nervous and I feel like I'm going to fail. Let me stop. Just walk through it. Just feel the pain of it and walk through it. Just walk through it. Awesome. Just go right on through it. And so, but you said something that was interesting to me about what does it mean when people take on too many projects and change direction of their intention too often. Somebody that I really love their philosophies on life and their understanding of the world is named Sadhguru, and he is an Indian thinker and a mystic, and he does wonderful work about helping human beings to understand their full potential in terms of their intellectual capacity. And he says something very interesting that is right aligned with what you just said, which is, if you want to reach your destination, stop changing directions. He said something along those lines, where it's like, if you have somewhere that you want to go and you see it there, and you start going, and then you're like, oh wait, no, but I'm gonna make a movie, and then you come back, no, but wait, I'm gonna go get me a hamburger, and then you keep going, but wait, I'm about to start, I'm gonna open up a nail shop on Slauson, and then you go, like, just get there, and then take it somewhere else, and then get there, and then you can't keep doing that.
Exactly.
Focus.
Love it.
Focus.
Say it 3 times.
Just focus. And you can do other stuff later. That's not like, oh, well, now you're keeping me from being able to explore all of the ideas that I have in life because I'm a multifaceted human being and I have hella ideas and I want to do all of them. Yes, you can. Can you do one first? Do one first.
Can we complete one? Just finish one real quick.
Do one.
Yeah.
Then you can do another one. Then do that. Finish that. Then you can do another one.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I was having another conversation with someone, and I was saying that it's like the effort when you do focus, it's interesting because I don't want to call it magic, but it's almost magical what happens when you like direct all of your focus on one little thing, and the return that comes from it is great, you know. But that's one thing I know that a lot of people need to understand that they currently don't. They don't get it. They don't get it. And you know, for those of you guys watching this video, I think, or listening to the audio, like, it's so important. It's so important that you understand whatever you're working on, you have to be willing for a certain period of time to focus just on that. You know, like when even I remember before, when I grew my business back when I was like 22, 23, I chose, back then I was actually fired from my first job, my nursing job, which is crazy. That's another story. But I got a second job, but I chose this job because this job allowed me, I could still do the work that I was comfortable in, but it didn't require so much mental energy.
Okay.
Right? So that now it's like, cool, I can save the energy that I have and put most of it into learning what I got to do to learn this business.
Absolutely.
And then from there, growing and making sure that I master this business and figuring it out.
Absolutely.
And it paid off, man. It paid off because I made the right choice. Because I definitely had opportunities to go to like this top-notch hospital, ICU place, you know, but it would have taken a lot of my mental energy. It definitely would have subtracted from what I could have achieved. Yes,
you're talking about managing your energy because it's finite.
Man, and I don't hear about, honestly, I don't hear about that concept a lot. Like, I've never coined it, as I call it conserving, which same managing, conserving, same thing, synonymous. But you're right, like you have to do that. You have to actively do that.
And it's finite energy. Yes, we are limitless as human beings in many ways, of course. But in terms of like the amount of daily energy that we have to exert is finite. It's going to run out at some point. So be careful with the things that you use it on. And you know, we talk about this often about the idea of being careful about having draining things in your life. Things that are taking and demanding energy from you that don't need to be there, eliminate them. That's why they say that evolution demands elimination. That if you want to evolve, get rid of the things that are taking up space that don't need to take up space in your mind, in your heart, in your spirit. That is energy that you could use on manifesting your vision. But instead, you know, you're engaging in dramatic endeavors in life that are fruitless.
Or you're still hanging out with the same people that they ain't about nothing.
Right.
You know?
Right. Be wary, be aware of
gotta be careful, man.
You exert your energy with and who's in your circle and who you're spending time with. It matters. It permeates your skin. People don't get that the energy that surrounds you quite literally permeates your skin, your being. It's around you. It's essentially in you. I know that sounds strange, but at the core of it, it affects you is what I'm trying to get at. It affects you. It's that which we have to be aware of.
Right.
And we have to try to make sure that our work is helpful in the world.
Yeah.
I think that as creatives, Nina Simone said that the artists, but I'll even edit it for this particular conversation, that as creatives, as people that create in the world, that it is our duty to be a reflection of the times. We are in times where, and the world has always had problems, but specifically in this particular political contentious moment, we have to be aware of the fact that if we call ourselves advocates of a more fair, just, loving, healthy world, we would want for our work to advance us toward that, and to always be aware of the fact that it is not only about us. That is the most fulfilling work, is when you know that your work is not only about you getting paid and being fly and being popping and all of it. It's good to be popping. It's better to help people.
Yeah, it's better to help people, be a cause of putting someone else in a better position in life. Right, for sure. I love that. I think that is true. Actually, I call it actualization. That's the term that I'll use. Like, you're matured and you're actualized is when you start to move based on that. Not just, of course, I gotta take care of myself. Of course. And I don't don't get me wrong, you know, the things that me personally I've chosen in the way that I want to do it, I know that I would over time get very, very well compensated for it. So it's like choosing the best of both, where you can get paid well, but at the same time, you're still doing what you love, and it's helping. It's based on helping a lot of people.
Absolutely.
For sure.
You don't choose between one or the other. Like, oh, either I'm going to help people in my life and be a catalyst for good, or I'm just going to handle my own thing and be flossy and fly. You can do both.
Right.
People, if they're not mutually exclusive, just do both.
Just do.
You don't have to choose between one or the other. Handle your own business. Take care of yourself and the people that are around you, the people that you love in your family.
Right.
And also be helpful to people. It's important.
Yep. That's good. So I want to ask you a question. What would you say is something that, like a quote you personally live by? Because you're successful. Like, you're 27. You are, you know, you have a prestigious career. You're a sought after speaker. You know, you got a lot of things going on. You're doing some things right, you know. What investments, like what are some of the most powerful investments you feel like you made? That at the time you didn't know, you didn't quite know if it were going to be good for you or not, but looking back, it's like, dang, it got to be a monetary investment or time or...
Time that I invested in myself.
What do you mean?
Around the age 19, 20, around that time, which is not all that long ago, but when I was around 19, 20, I spent a great deal of time really reflecting on who I am, what I want, how I want to contribute to the world. What am I? Who am I? You know, what is this experience in this world about? I think that foundational time that I spent with myself, in terms of like, it wasn't about like going out and partying. It wasn't about being the most pop, and it wasn't about being on the scene at that particular time in my life. It was like a good chunk of time where I spent like reading, researching a lot, but reading text and researching things that were helping me to understand myself and my own mind better, so that I could use energy not on, you know, the anxiousness that comes with not knowing who you are.
Right. Yeah.
Not knowing who you are, what you want to do is hella anxiety inducing.
And it's draining. It's exhausting.
So instead of using energy on that and use, you know, that time in my life to figure out what am I, who am I, what do I want, how do I want to contribute to the world, then from that point, the years moving forward, the energy just goes to developing my visions rather than moderating and mediating my insecurity. When you can deal, you know, like, insecurity is time consuming.
So you know, because you asked, well, first off, I vouch for all that because I knew you when you were 19, 20.
Right, let me be clear. You already, okay.
And I'll tell you guys right now, she does not look a day older than when I used to see her all the time in college. It's nuts. It is so crazy. And it's the best thing ever.
You kindly.
That's the first thing. The second thing is...
and he looking pretty fly, you feel me?
I mean, come on, man. Look, late bloomer. Look, stop it. Stop. Okay, so you touched on something that's really brilliant, because a lot of folks don't know what that looks like. Case in point, what you just said is you talked about, instead of nursing my insecurities, essentially.
Literally.
Right? Which is what so many people still do. Oh, that was a great way to put it. You actually started to ask yourself certain questions. What? That's what I got from what you said.
Yes.
But the thing is, how are you even aware that was like, that's what you were doing? Some people, they're just going about life. They have no idea that what they're doing is nursing their insecurities. Like, how did you even be aware of that?
It was the things that I was exposing myself to, the ideas that I was exposing myself to. And if I'm being fully and completely honest, it was the types of books that I was reading at the time. People identify them.
Books?
Yeah, they were books.
Do you remember any of them?
The Four Agreements is a wonderful foundational text. It just helps you to ask those questions. Why do humans get jealous? why do humans react to frustration and anger the way that they do? You know, asking these questions helps you to understand why your mind and your emotions do very particular things. It doesn't mean that then, because of that knowledge, that you can then control what your mind does, because, you know, mental health is a very real thing in this very dramatic and traumatic world that we live in.
Yeah.
When you struggle with mental health, anxiety, depression, and all of these things. But I know that for me, in my specific experience, was that when I started to ask myself those questions, I then was able to access the capacity to be fully aware of what my mind was doing. So when I would have fruitless, negative thoughts, judgmental thoughts, hating thoughts, because, like, you know, somebody walk by and you want to hate on them inside your mind, like, oh, she thinks she cute, really?
Yeah,
you ain't cute. Like, and I quite literally, if I had a fruitless thought like that, it was a process where I would be like, okay, now what purpose did that serve? I would dismiss the thought as useless, and eventually they kind of just stop coming. That is energy that I don't have to use on insecurity, negativity. That's energy that can be used on self-development.
Oh my God, it's so true. This is great. Oh my God, this is great. And I'm just reflecting on what you're saying, because it's books that has gotten me so far, like this far. Because what happens when you read certain books, they like wake you up. They wake you up to things you never thought about before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there were a number of books that transform your way of navigating the world, because books just expose you to ideas that you didn't have in your mind before, which grows your perception, which allows for you to expand the possibilities of your life.
Okay, so 4 Agreements is a book, and that's by Don Miguel Ruiz. You got a couple more that you can think of off the fly?
Well, one that
more.
was helpful for me was The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, which I really appreciated. I did, if we're talking about books that are about self-perception, I did read a number of Iyanla Vanzant's books, and she has so many, you know, that can be looked into. I read a book, and I'm still reading a book called Conscious Loving, which helps us to understand why human beings are so largely entangled in traumatic romantic relationships, and how we become co-dependent upon each other rather than just being kind of in a cohesive, healthy relationship, a kind of codependency that is unhealthy. And that book gets at that. And then also the political texts that I was engaging are helpful. I think that when people think of, like, I studied sociology, I studied Pan-African studies, Black studies.
Right.
I studied, and in my studying that in undergrad, I was also exposed to philosophy and history classes, political science classes. And all of these texts that I'm reading throughout these times in my life, when I'm reading Asada, when I'm reading A Taste of Power by Elaine Brown, when I'm reading texts that are written by Angela Davis, and I'm reading texts that are written by Alice Walker, In Search of Our Mother's Garden. I'm reading, you know, all of these different politically centered books in terms of understanding politically what's happening in this country and the world. They're helping me to have a greater understanding of why the world and this country is the way that it is. And when you are armed with that understanding, you feel less defenseless. A lot of insecurity comes from, I don't know why things are happening as they are. I don't get it, and I don't like it, so I'm gonna avoid it, and I'm just gonna pop bottles and get bitches and get money. And the thing is, like, you can't, if you are avoiding it because you don't understand it, you are coming from a super disempowered place. But if you study, look into it, and understand why what is happening, then you can look at it and say, okay, I don't like that, but I understand why. I get it.
That goes with a lot of things in life too.
Absolutely.
Just by educating yourself on it, it changes your whole perspective on it. Like, for example, cancer. That's a touchy one, right? And my dad has battled with cancer himself. But the thing is, we're a family full of medical professionals. So I'm like, man, this family, people would think we're just kind of like, something's wrong with us, because we're just like sitting around like, okay, yeah, cancer is, we're just sitting around. But normally, if another family might hear of that, they're just, it's very emotional. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But because we know so much about it, it really does change the way you view things when you know about it. And that's why it pays to read books. It pays to inform yourself on these things.
Absolutely.
So we deal a lot of ignorance in our society.
Absolutely. The trauma that comes from not understanding, the trauma that comes from ignorance, because now you have to just, be emotionally invested in a really traumatized way because you don't get it and it's harmful and you don't like it. Versus like, I see that. Okay, I see what we can do to change it. I see what we can do to remedy it. I know whether or not I can remedy it because there's a knowingness there. Mm-hmm. That immediately mediates the kind of emotional trauma that is associated with things that we don't like happening.
Man. So the key word here is educate yourself.
Educate yourself about everything possible, be inquisitive, and question everything.
Isn't that what you do? That is your job, is to question everything. Don't just take anything because, I believe it because my uncle told me when I was 5 years old that this is what it is. Question it and go check for yourself. Don't be lazy. We are also trained to be intellectually lazy. I'm just going to believe it because somebody told me. No, go check it yourself. It's like people are forgetting, or people don't know how to think anymore.
Think.
Yeah.
Think. Check it for yourself.
Think for yourself.
It shouldn't be a revolutionary idea to think for yourself. That should be one of the joys of being human. We have the ability to engage in intellectual pursuits. What kind of foolishness would it be to squander it? We are not ants. We don't just exist to survive. We exist to thrive as human beings. We have the ability to engage in intellectual pursuits. What a shame it would be to squander it and not question things. That's lazy.
That's lazy. I agree.
It's lazy.
I agree.
I'm gonna just believe that because it's comfortable. Don't be lazy.
Or like when people will bring up something, I'm like, I could just tell you just got this from somebody else. Like you ain't even
thought about it.
Yeah, you ain't even thought. You just got this from someone else. Oh my gosh, yeah. But yeah, thinking for yourself. Think for yourself. Well, first that's the society in today, but for anybody, once again, for guys, if you're listening to this, watching this, you got to understand that your life as it's cut out to be has come from your willingness to either go by what you think it exists or doesn't exist, or you're living off of what someone else thinks of you, or what someone else thinks your life should be like, or how things are, whatever narrative someone else has of you is what you're going for. So that's why we talk about these things. That's why it's so key, is because your life is going to be created based off of that.
Absolutely. The limits of your life is the limit of your willingness to question, engage, pursue.
Right.
And if you engage more ideas, and if you question more critically, and if you think more keenly, the capacity of your life opens up and expands. But the more you just stick to what you know, and I'm gonna just stick right here because this is my comfort zone, nothing beautiful comes from comfort zone. Nothing, I'll rephrase, nothing expansive, nothing that is evolving comes from your comfort zone. Discomfort is a necessity of evolution. If you only want to be comfortable at all times with what you're doing, get settled where you are, because that's where you're gonna stay. Just settle where you are, because that's where you're gonna stay.
Go ahead and chill out.
Be willing to be uncomfortable, and be okay with being uncomfortable. You can walk right through it. You don't have to retreat when you feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Just go right through it. It's temporary.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, thanks for dropping so much knowledge.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I appreciate it.
Intelligent, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about, just real quick, your play, because I know you have another idea of a play that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So let's bring that up real quick. So what are you working on next?
Okay. So the intersection Woke Black Folk is the name of the project, and it essentially is dealing with Black political identity within the Western context. My next project will be the second installation of the Intersection series.
So like a sequel?
It's in many ways, yes.
Like volume 2.
Essentially, right? But it's engaging a similar theme, but with a different demographic of people. So it's all about engaging the interesting things that people do and think, specifically Black people in this world. Black people, so woke Black folk deals with kind of like Black political consciousness in a Western context, whereas my next project will deal with the way in which global Black communities, those Black people within the Black African diaspora that are not in America, the way that they engage with Black Americans that we call African Americans, Black Americans specifically. I can speak from the place of a West African woman. I can speak from the place of a Nigerian woman because I am Nigerian American. So I understand the Nigerian's perspective, the West African's perspective, the African's perspective, and then I also understand the quote unquote Black American's perspective. And what I do is I serve as a bridge between these two communities to communicate. Right. And this second show will engage the way that these communities, Nigerians and Black Americans, engage each other. They're very similar and very different. And we have to be willing to look at those differences.
Yeah, that's an entirely new conversation that hopefully we get a chance to really dive into, you know, and take the time to really dive into that. But just like you know, being Nigerian, it's it's an interesting coming of two worlds, right? And being able to talk and, you know, mediate between the two. Yeah. But I'm excited to see what comes out of that. You know, I think that's great work, and it's a much needed conversation. It's such a also a very specific conversation, niche conversation, but once again, like it's definitely needed.
And it broadly still then becomes, even though it's a very niche conversation, that the broader theme is what do we do with difference, and what do we do with human complexity? How do we handle it? That's really the question that the key is. And also you talk about my work. I'm very excited about what you're doing with the Think Alpha Project. You're out here really facilitating absolutely mandatory and necessary conversations. And that's what we need to evolve, to grow, to expand. So hats off to you, because you out here making it happen.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Hey, it's just work, and it's cool because as much work that I put into it, it just doesn't feel, I don't dread it at all. It feels like it's something I look forward to. So I know I'm on the right path because of how it feels.
That's right.
So it's fine with me, and I get to connect with you. It's been years. It's been years.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So how do we find you? I know we can find you on Instagram.
Sure, yes. So my Instagram is Fumi_Lola. So that's F as in family, U, N as in Nancy, M as in mom, I_LOLA. My website has all information about myself and my projects that I'm engaging in and any particular efforts that I'm working on, and that's www.funmilola.com. And Twitter is _Funmilola_.
That's awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much. Thank you so much
for having me. I'm so glad to be in conversation with you, and I think we got somewhere.
Oh yeah, we definitely did.
I think we got
definitely
somewhere.
did. We left some people with some truth. That's what matters.
There it is.